Hi, and welcome to the When Women Fly podcast. Each episode, I have poignant conversations with women who fly, run, surf, ski, climb, or otherwise soar, and possess a passion for life that is infectious. These are honest and insightful conversations about dreams and reinvention, often in the face of uncertainty, doubt, or other impediments. We talk about busting paradigms, grit, working hard, and playing hard, all while building a community around the empowering metaphor of flight. I am your host, Sylvia Winter, a pilot, runner, mother, skier, list maker, and apparently podcaster. I believe that when we share our stories, own our fears, and dismantle our perceived limitations, the possibilities are boundless. Whether you're pursuing your passion or simply love the idea of possibility and wonder, this podcast is for you. Thank you so much for joining me today. Let's get started. Today, I have the pleasure of talking to Kikkan Randall, a 5-time Olympian and champion cross-country skier brought up in Anchorage, Alaska. Kikkan has won 17 national titles and made 29 podiums on the World Cup. Not only is Kikkan one of the most accomplished American cross-country skiers of all time, she became a mother in between Olympic Games. And in 2019, she ran the New York City Marathon in under 3 hours, just months after completing treatment for breast cancer. Kikkan was 19 when she made her Olympic debut at Salt Lake City in 2002, a year out of high school. In her final Olympics, the 2018 Winter Olympics in Pyeongchang, Kikkan and her teammate Jessie Diggins became the first American cross-country skiers to win Olympic gold medals at the women's team sprint event. Kikkan talks about setting goals, learning from losses, and how to build steps towards formidable targets. Kikkan Randall went from experiencing Olympic glory to undergoing chemotherapy in a matter of months. We talk about overcoming hard challenges and rising to face new ones. Kikkan has earned a resume bursting with historic achievements. The road for an American woman to be competitive on the cross-country skiing world stage was uncharted, as the sport is dominated by the Scandinavian countries who celebrate the winter sports and pump enormous amounts of resources into the teams as symbols of national pride. Not so much in the U.S., but Kikkan changes this, breaks down stereotypes, and applies grit and determination to lead a new era, talent and success, and team spirit into the sport. You will want to keep your eye on the U.S. women's ski team. They just completed their season and have Beijing 2022 Olympic rings in their eyes. Kikkan was the first American woman to win a World Cup medal and World Championship medals. As a 3-time overall World Cup sprint champion and a 26-time World Cup podium finisher, this could be simply about an unbelievable athlete and competitor. But this podcast is about more than rewards and accolades. We celebrate a collective spirit of dismantling stereotypes and reaching beyond predetermined limits. We are celebrating Women's History Month on the When Women Fly podcast by leaning into stories of community and talking to women who are deeply involved in creating, nurturing, and growing communities. We are all about sharing our platform with courageous and inspiring female figures who are making a difference in their fields and the world at large by shaping a new narrative daily and showing us anything is possible with tenacity, creativity, and purpose. The common thread is a belief that collective energy and action can make change. We realize dreams of a positive vision for women by creating network, providing support, and empowerment. Community is all about relationships. In this conversation with Kikkan, we talk about building community and turning an individual sport into a collective. Kikkan highlights the effect of collaboration in competition. For a key component to the women's unprecedented results was and still is a team culture that has been more than a decade in the making with Kikkan at the helm. They value each other as much for being formidable humans as racing fast, and celebrate individual success as a collective success because each woman is recognized for her role in creating a team. The American girls are known for their happy, positive, full of life vibe. They are at once some of the most competitive girls in the world and deeply devoted to their team culture, rejecting the tendency to build up as an individual by pushing and putting others down. While the goal of winning a medal kept Kikkan motivated, the spirit of the team, the other women who were working toward a similar goal, was just as important. Kikkan will tell us what it is like to win a gold medal and how she implements the athlete's mindset in and out of sports and the power of community. There is depth and breadth in this conversation, so let's get started. I start by welcoming Kikkan and asking how she got started with skiing as a wee one. Kikkan, thank you so much for taking this time to talk.
My pleasure. Excited to be on here.
Kikkan, how did you get into cross-country skiing?
My mom's side of the family was really into it. So I didn't get into cross-country skiing until I was 5 or 6. We had moved to Anchorage and they had a strong junior Nordic program. So I got signed up. I think a couple of my aunts were coaching. Went out there and did it. I will admit I did not fall in love with it at first. It seemed like a lot of hard work. But a smart coach told me that if I skied up the hill, then I could come back down and go off jumps and go through gates. And so I enjoyed that part of it. I actually got my first time on skis, though, the day after my first birthday. My dad had been working at a rental shop and brought home the smallest boots and skis that they could find. And he built a little hill for me in the front yard. So from before I could walk, I had actually experienced the feeling of gliding on snow.
So your first experience was actually alpine when you were living in Salt Lake City.
It was, yeah, right there in the front yard. And they were actually a pair of Fisher skis. So it was good foreshadowing.
So you have a pretty active family, don't you?
I do. And I feel incredibly grateful for that. My mom's side of the family, there were 7 kids. I have an aunt and an uncle that both went to the Olympics in cross-country skiing. So certainly a lot of exciting stories, things to look up to on the Olympic side. My mom and herself included, all of her siblings, they all did sports growing up. My dad's side of the family was a little bit more traditional. He has 2 brothers, so it was football and track and field. But growing up in Wisconsin, he actually fell in love with alpine skiing in high school, moved out west, and ended up totally getting into the alpine world, timed the World Pro Skiing circuit for a while. So his dream, and my mom's as well, was really to get me on snow and hopefully pass along that passion for skiing of all kinds.
So you moved to Anchorage when you were very small?
Yeah, 3 years old. So my whole memorable life has been in Alaska, really. My brother and sister tease me because they were both born in Alaska. So they say I'm not a real Alaskan, but I think 3 years old on up to 35 counts for quite a bit.
Yeah, I think so. So I'm really curious how you navigated the alpine and Nordic sports competitively, and especially when you bumped into high school when you had to start making decisions. Also, you were running competitively during that time. So you had a couple sports going on, and I'm wondering if you can speak to how each one of them factored into what would unfold and which one of them you had to let go and why.
I think the key word there is navigate. It certainly early on was a smorgasbord of activities, which again, I'm super grateful for because it gave me a chance to develop a lot of different skills, be in individual sports, team sports. So that real just background of trying a lot of different things was important. As I got into 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, I got really interested in alpine skiing. I think particularly because there were some Alaskans that were winning Olympic medals, Tommy Moe, Hillary Lind. And so having those kind of local heroes, like, oh, I got super excited to chase after medals in alpine. Then in middle school, I was joining the cross country running team and the track team, and I found I loved the pure return on effort of running, of just very clear goals. You could see over the course of a season how you could improve. So I love that part of it. Then I come into high school, and my plan was, oh, well, I'm just going to do everything. But all my running friends were doing the cross country ski team. And it started to become clear that we wouldn't be able to afford equipment across all sports. And the time was also just going to be hard to overlap. So at that point, running was becoming an interest, at kind of the strongest one. And I thought cross country would be a perfect counter season training vehicle. So I initially kind of said, okay, I'll do the cross country team for the connection to running and the people. I mean, all my friends were doing it. So initially it was just to cross train for running. And then at the end of my sophomore year of high school, my running coach, who had been running this awesome summer training program, was moving to Bozeman, Montana. And so I needed a new training group. And I happened to get introduced to a three-time Olympian named Jim Galanis, who was starting a new junior ski program in town called Gold 2002. And so I thought, oh, well, that'll be a great way to stay in shape. And within a couple of weeks of roller skiing for the first time and kind of learning more about the ski world, I just fell in love with this path towards cross country skiing because the 2002 Olympics were just 3 years away. And I switched my goals from going to a national running meet to trying to make world juniors. And from there on, I just started to realize that cross country skiing was this nice combination of all those other sports. I still got the thrill of the downhills. I got that peer effort of like the running, but it really had a team component. And I think that's when I started to really discover my love of being on a team and working towards shared goals.
Yeah, and I feel like that importance of team is something that you've really helped to cultivate into the contemporary team culture that we see as well. Because I don't think it's true. And if you look across the other teams, when you go to the World Cups and the Olympics, they don't all have this strong culture that the US women have, do they?
Well, I mean, inherently in an individual sport where you are competing against your teammates, it doesn't necessarily set the stage for a wonderful, throw your hand over their shoulder kind of environment. For us on the US team, it was some very intentional work to build that team culture. But we found that as we built it, it not only helped our physical performance, but it just created this lift in terms of having to ride the ups and downs of being in Europe for 5 months at a time, kind of taking on the power in those relay events. And we found that by kind of coming together and having fun and really supporting each other, almost like siblings, I think we created a power out of it. And then what was cool was as that became so visible in the World Cup from our team, other teams started to adopt it. And you really saw this shift in other teams kind of based on our example. And that wasn't an intended consequence, but stepping back, it really opened up the World Cup into kind of this greater camaraderie amongst even the most intense competitors.
Oh, that's really interesting. Yeah, that's really interesting. I think that sometimes the American spirit, having lived in Europe, I can appreciate how it is very different there in general. And I think that sometimes the American spirit is actually really refreshing. And it sounds like that you brought some of that to the European circuit. That's really neat.
And I really credit having an amazing coach in high school who immediately made team at the forefront of what we did and established that kind of love of the camaraderie, that love of the team goals. And so once that became my normal. And so every team I was on past that was like, okay, of course, where's the team? Let's build the team. And that I think helped me be a leader to developing that team on the US ski team later on.
So there's the team aspect, and then the sport itself was something that captivated you. Can you speak more to what that is like and why you just became addicted to Nordic skiing?
Well, I have to flash back to being 5 years old and sitting on the living room floor at my grandparents' house, watching the 1988 Winter Olympics on TV, kind of really starting to conceptualize what the Olympics was at that point, and then looking behind me and seeing pictures of my aunt and uncle in their Olympic suits behind me and going, all right, I want to do that. I want to go to the Olympics, but cross country skiing, I don't know. It's kind of dorky. It looks like hard work. I'm going to do something way cooler. And then doing all that exploration, and then only to find myself really coming back and going, no, actually, cross country skiing is an incredible sport. And I think it's part of it is just the lifestyle of it, the fact that our training, most of it is outdoors in these beautiful places. You're covering ground on your own power. The training is so diverse and dynamic. You're working on your endurance, you're working on your power, the different kind of phases of the training year. The people I just are so high quality, the places you get to go. And it was intriguing to me in those first year or two into really seriously cross country ski training that no American woman had ever won an Olympic medal. And it occurred to me that in these other sports, history had already been made. And it was this kind of exciting open frontier of like, okay, well, we've never done it before, but why can't we do it? wouldn't it be cool to win a medal someday? And then kind of that setting me on the path as well.
Oh my gosh. So age 16 is when you decided to commit. Is that correct to Nordic?
Correct. Yep. Yep. Just again, shifted kind of those goals from trying to qualify to the national cross country running meet to trying to make world juniors. And then I got to go over to Europe that first year. And then my senior year of high school, I qualified for the world championship team in Lahti, Finland. And it happened to overlap with the state ski championships in Alaska. So I had to decide, do I go to world championships or do I get my final chance at a state skiing title, which up to that point I hadn't won. So it was like, oh, geez, this is actually a tough decision. But in the end, I decided to go to world championships. I think that was a good decision because it was just really cool to just go there and really gain the experience and be ignited with that love of like competing at that level. But it did mean I left high school without a state high school skiing title to my name.
Oh gosh, why? Because you had to go to the Olympics
Exactly.
and what about when you were 19 and you then made it into the Salt Lake City Olympics? Was that experience for you like?
That was such a wild experience for so many reasons. So I decided at 16 I wanted to try to make that team, maybe a little bit naively because I didn't understand that cross country skiers generally peak after years of experience. But they had just introduced the sprint, which kind of opened a window for me to come in as a young athlete and compete. That was my final year of eligibility at the World Junior Championships. So really my big focus for that season was to try to win a medal at the World Junior Championships. I went in as the number one ranked sprinter at those game at that championship and didn't manage to qualify for the heats because back then they only took top 16 and I think I finished 18th. I had been a little sick coming in. So, right before it's almost a little bit devastating like I don't reach my goal at the World Juniors, but then a week later there I am at the training camp prior to my first Olympic Games, prior to the Salt Lake Olympic Games, which is like a home game. So I kind of flipped from being like in contention for a medal to literally being like the little kid on the team and following around all my big brothers and sisters on the team, just watching and learning. And I went into those games knowing that I was young and it was really about building experience. But when you get to the Olympic Games, it quickly becomes so much focus on the medals that it was a little bit hard to balance the fact that, in one race I was 61st. And I remember coming back to the wax cabin after that race and feeling pretty down, like, oh, 61st, that feels like such a failure. And thankfully, my coach at the time just came up and gave me a big high five and was like, Kikkan, that was your best race of the season. Like, you were closer to the winner than you've ever been. And so I needed support around me to help me kind of figure out what that whole experience was. And thankfully, it was okay, I'm young. I've now seen what this is like. I watched Becky Scott, a fellow North American, make the podium. And I looked at the banner right after that and saw light the fire within and decided that medal, I want to go for that medal. And so, left those Olympics feeling very motivated and then went to the junior national championships the next week and got beat by kids, who didn't make the Olympic team. So that was a good piece of humble pie also to have tasted the Olympics, but still be kind of recognize where I was in my progression.
So can you speak to what the U.S. women's team looked like at that point, just as a benchmark to then when we talk about kind of what it is today?
Yeah, so I think coming into that season, there was, I think, just Nina Kempel was officially named to the national team. And then because it was a home games, we were able to name a full team of 8 women to compete at those games. And I wasn't actually the youngest. Lindsay Weir was 17 at the time. So there were a couple of us young guns, and then all the way up to Nina Kempel, who was in her fourth Olympics, really like this was her last shot. And so she actually should get credit for an amazing race in the 30K. She ended up finishing top 15. And that was the first time I think we had ever been that close. So that was a solid result for her. But the rest of the results were a little challenging for our women's team in particular. I mean, the relay, I think we were dead last. So we named a full team, but we really didn't feel in it, maybe besides Nina's result. And I think Wendy maybe got top 30 in one. So you really felt like a participant at the Olympic Games as coming from the US,
As opposed to a contender.
as opposed to a contender. And, it had been a lifelong dream of mine to reach the Olympics and to participate. And that is an incredible accomplishment in and of itself. But once I got there and got the chance to participate, for me, that didn't feel like enough. It feel like I want to go after this and see if we can actually compete for medals.
Okay, so how did you reset your goals after Salt Lake City?
Well, I mean, I definitely didn't have any indications with my results at those games that any of this was going to be possible. But I sat down with my coaches at the end of the season and I said, "Okay, I was 44th place in the sprint. How am I going to get from 44th place to truly compete for the podium?" And so we took that like giant leap and we kind of broke it down into, okay, if you're going to be competitive for the Olympic podium, well then you have to kind of start showing these other benchmarks. And so it was world championship medal, top 10 at the world championships, top 10 on World Cup, best in, and so we built it back until it was literally like a goal that was attainable for me that next season. But that progression, as we mapped it out, was going to take 10 years. And I remember at 19 years old going like, 10 years? Like, that's half my lifetime. I still had that fire in my belly. So I was thinking, okay, well, yeah, it says 10 years, but I'm just going to work harder. I mean, look what I've achieved in the first 3 years. Just imagine where I can go. So I was convinced I was going to get there faster. But I think it was really important for me to have this roadmap laid out to see that it was going to be kind of reaching one milestone and then that was going to springboard the next. And so it was going to give me a way to kind of stay motivated on smaller goals and then measure my progression along the way.
So it sounds like you had a plan, and were you internally motivated, intrinsically motivated, or what was really driving you to just continue on that 10-year trajectory?
That's a very good question. I mean, beyond the fame and fortune that comes from being a top level cross country skier, of course. I think I was excited again by this open frontier of the fact that no American woman had medaled. It was kind of like this just exciting carrot. And I really enjoy up to that point, I really enjoyed what I was doing with the training. And I had started to combine it with part-time studies at Alaska Pacific University. So I kind of felt confident that I could continue my education, but focus on training. I also really credit my coach, Jim Galanis, with kind of planting this idea that we just hadn't been going around about our development the right way because so many of our talented skiers were going directly into the NCAA system, which was a great support network, but it was really hard to then jump from there to international experience and success. So he kind of thought if we, can keep athletes in a supportive environment like Anchorage, which has all the right infrastructure, and you put the time in over the crucial years of say like 19 to 23, which is typically that college period, and you really do a lot of European experience and you keep the training year round and consistent, he thought that could be a new approach that would help us be successful. And so I bought into that vision. And especially being in Salt Lake and around that level, I just started to feel like, yeah, this just feels like the right level for me to pursue. But the interesting thing was back home, my grandfather, who had been, a really good, supportive, inspirational voice in my life, was not convinced that it was the right call. He's like, "Awesome, you've made the Olympics. Now you need to go to school and get your degree. Like you're never going to make a living at this." And so we had all these back and forths, and I laid out my plan, and I said, "Okay, I think this is possible, and this is why. And I'm going to figure out, staying here in Anchorage, I can, find ways to appeal to like some local sponsors so that I can, afford to focus on training." And it was a battle for quite a few years until I think I got my top 10 at the Olympics in 2006, and then got my first World Cup podium in 2007. Then all of a sudden I started to finally convince him that it was worthwhile. But for a few years in between there, I was not only battling, his skepticism, all the kids I graduated from high school with were now finishing their university degrees, going on to do other things. And I was kind of bopping along, like hitting some goals, but, not making any rapid progressions, working a part-time job. And it was at the 2005 World Championships, I would say is the lowest point of women's skiing that I experienced in my career. We got pulled out of the relay. I was 10th from last in the 10K, like missing home, wondering if I'd made the right decision, feeling very far from that trajectory of winning a medal and tempted to just walk away. But thankfully that I went back to that roadmap and I said, well, okay, 2006 Olympics, like that's a big checkpoint. Like, let's just get through that and then I can reevaluate. And that's what I needed to keep me through that plateau that was just before a breakthrough. So I think I was lucky to have the right support network around me to keep me going through those years when it wasn't super clear. But then all that training started to build up and experience, and then it was like the springboard.
It seems like a pattern, doesn't it, to have that plateau that sort of tests your commitment. And if you stick with it, it seems like in your experience that the breakthrough is really profound. Did that happen at Sochi as well, after Sochi as well?
I think if I look back through my career, pretty much every high point came after something really difficult, whether it was an injury or a plateau or, a team selection or anything. And I do think that it does solidify some perspective and kind of mental skills and grit that ends up coming in handy then when you get into that championship race and, you just kind of realize like, I got nothing to lose here. Like, why not just go? Fortunate for some of those experiences early on that tested me, because when it did encounter a situation like the Sochi Olympics, where I was the gold medal favorite, everything was coming together, I was all set, and then I get knocked out in the quarterfinals. Having to process that both in that moment, but then the after, the weeks, months after that. By that point, I'd already kind of realized like it's really about the process. It's about laying it all out there. And as long as you give it your best, like you can walk away satisfied, proud. And if you didn't get your goal, well, then that turns into a heavy dose of motivation.
So tell us where you were in your trajectory at Sochi, because I think it sounds like it was a real pivot point.
It was. I mean, what was cool is, from that 19 years old, 10-year plan, it really felt like fast forward and snap. One day I wake up and here I come into the 2014 Olympics skate sprint, which is my strongest event. I hadn't got a chance at that until the last chance for that was 2006. So it was like an 8-year gap to wait for that skate sprint at the Olympics. But I was coming in as the two-time overall World Cup sprint leader, winner on the Olympic course the year before. Like it just felt like everything was clicking, coming together, and I just really appreciated the confidence coming in and the fact that I now had this platform to shine a little bit of light on my sport and my team. But it was also brand new territory to be dealing with the pressure of being an Olympic gold medal favorite. So I did my best to manage it, rely on all those skills I had built over time. And I was out skiing the day before the race, and I had a little internal dialogue with myself about kind of goals and expectations. And I said, all right, I can now say with 100% confidence that I can go out and win tomorrow. And I took a second, that in of itself, to be like, wow, I can say that. But the second piece was this was now 12 years after that first Olympics. 3 Olympics had already happened since then. And it was like, okay, this is the Olympics, but it's one day. And a lot of things can go right, but a lot of things cannot go right. And that's not going to define, the approach I put to it, who I am as a person. So I said, I want to go out there tomorrow and I want to ski bold. I want to take risks. I want to know that I ski with everything I have. And no matter what, if I do that, I'm going to feel good about it. As I'm thinking about that type of effort, I'm picturing myself standing on the podium. Like I know that's the possibility. But I think I was also subconsciously setting myself up for anything can happen. When I did cross the finish line and I looked at that scoreboard and I saw that I had missed qualification by 5/10 or hundredths of a second, I mean, like a toenail, and I realized I was eliminated, my mind immediately kind of went back to that promise and said, look, I did everything I could. I made a bold move out there. I skied as hard as I could. In that finish stretch, I tried to fight with everything I could as I felt those shadows come up around me. And dang it, I was frustrated knowing that opportunity was gone. But also, by the time I left that media zone, I just kind of said, you know what, this is a powerful lesson. It's going to help me, as in my next chapters of my life. But it's also going to be a really cool thing to speak to, because if you say, oh, work hard, dream big, and you get your goals, like that's not really the real life story that most people face. There will be instances when you prepare and you give everything and you fall a little short. But that's okay, because that's why challenge is exciting. That's why sport is exciting, because you never know. And as long as you give it your best, that's a feeling no one can take away.
Yeah, I think it's one of the things that really makes such huge fans out of people in the sport is the ups and downs and how those are navigated as sort of the human beings behind the all the attention and just all the rejiggering you have to do when your plans just don't work out. So let's talk about what comes up in life besides being an athlete and how you maneuver changes and uncertainty beyond your own training. We will talk about 2018, but what happened between 2014 and 2018 seems like we should give it some time, mostly because you became a mother, which is pretty awesome, pretty incredible that between two Olympic Games, the latter of which you did get a gold, that you chose to become a mother. And I'd love for you to speak to that.
Well, it was the best thing I could have ever done. I didn't know at the time, but coming off 2014, I had a big decision to make. I knew I would not get another shot at a skate sprint until 2022. And I figured I was probably a little bit out of the realm of still competing. So not knowing or knowing I wouldn't have a shot at my best event at an Olympic level, I knew I did want to start a family. I'd had a really successful career. It's like, well, shoot, am I done? Do I continue on? But maybe not getting that medal in 2014, left a little bit of fire in my belly to, say, like, I want to give it a little more time. And I knew we could be competitive for team medals in 2018. I also realized I had put all this work in and I had really just gotten to the fun part. So then I kind of looked at it and went, well, okay, I don't want it to be an either or. So is there a way to do both? And really just kind of started looking around for other female athletes who had done it. And there wasn't a great example in cross country skiing at that point, but there were some runners that had done it. And so I kind of thought, okay, I think this is something I want to do. I want to become a mom. I don't want to wait 4 more years. And I just kind of said, let's see if I can do it. Like, kept an open mind and didn't put a lot of pressure of like I had to come back. I had to be in perfect form because you can't exactly predict when your pregnancy is going to happen. You can't predict what, if your baby is healthy, going to be healthy or not, and what other kind of factors there will be. So I just went into it with this, like, hey, if I get to keep doing this, awesome. I'm going to do it, with my family and just kind of approach it with curiosity. And it was really cool to, we were fortunate with the timing. It happened kind of in that midpoint between two Olympics. So I did have to take a season off, but I enjoyed just, seeing how much I could train with my pregnancy. Not being on the circuit for a year made me realize how much I love it and how much I miss the team. And so that created some extra momentum. And then once I had my son, thankfully I had an incredible support network around me. My husband Jeff was home. His parents chipped in. The team was really supportive. They said, "Yeah, we'd love to have you continue competing. So take the time you need." So I was able to come back, and it took some patience for sure, because there were some changes in my body, just the dynamic of sleep, as all the parents out there know. You just didn't have unlimited time to train anymore. But at the same time, I had a real like appreciation for that time I got to go out and train, and knowing that as long as I really gave it my best and I made the most of that time, no matter what the result, I came home to a little baby that was happy to see me. And it helped shift my perspective a little bit to be a little less about the results and a little bit more about like, hey, I get to do this, and let's see what else I have left to improve. And it was wonderful to be able to bring my family on the road. The one thing I didn't anticipate, however, was how much my teammates were going to improve and how that was going to shift the dynamic to where I wasn't this like strong leader out in the front that just automatically, was the leader of every relay. I was now like fighting for start spots with my teammates. It was really good because it pushed me, it made me nervous, and it made me like, really dig in. And it was also really cool to know that the time that we had all spent kind of pushing each other had lifted the whole group up. I guess that was also a shift in perspective, maybe going into those last 2 seasons of being grateful for every opportunity I got. But if I also wasn't on the start line for Team USA, I also could feel really good about the contribution I'd made to my teammates, and we could celebrate any result together.
Yeah, and you had this little person by your side the whole time.
I did, yeah. And I found at the 2017 World Championships. We had an evening sprint, and so that day I was mom. I was, playing with Breck. I was changing diapers, washing out bottles, and then it was really like, oh, 2 hours till start. All right, handed the baby to my dad, headed off to to the race, ended up getting a bronze medal, and then literally like just after I got out of the press conference, I walk in and I see into the wax cabin and I see Breck up in the air, no pants on. They've got the heat gun out. My dad had gotten so excited he'd forgotten to like check Breck's diaper, and so then it was like right back into mom mode. And I was just like, this is so perfect. I get to do it all.
Your whole life is right there. I read that your impact, and maybe it wasn't just you, but the community, the timing was such that there were other new moms during that cycle and maybe also men that had children, and that there was a bit of a culture shift within international skiing.
Yeah, I mean, that's the funny thing is it almost became like a normal thing. That season, there were, I think, 5 women who took at least part of the race season off, had a baby, came back all within a few months of each other. And so when I came back to the World Cup in the fall of 2016, we had lobbied the FIS to work with the each World Cup organizer to have special rooms available at the venue for us to go change diapers. And what was cool is the organizers got really excited about it. So they went all out. They had diapers in there, they had toys, they had changing tables, and it was this space that not only could we go and have to work with our kids, but then we got to connect with each other a little bit. And I had always been friendly with Marit Bjorgen, but I found when we both became moms, all of a sudden we found ourselves like finding each other to talk about like, oh, isn't it crazy when they do this, or sharing that mom bond. And it was just kind of cool how it was this boom. So many of us did it because it just showed you how possible and beneficial it is.
Did you find that you were stronger in any ways coming back?
In those first couple of months after the birth, I felt like an aerobic beast. I mean, you've been carrying around this extra weight. I actually built muscle mass during my pregnancy. Of course, the aerobic benefits of all that extra blood volume. I felt incredibly strong in that respect. On the flip side, because I was still breastfeeding, I didn't have the full tension back in my joints. And so when it came time to sprinting, it's like the mind knew what to do, but when I go to apply that power, it just wasn't quite connecting. And it took me until about the 10-month mark to get that back. I'd, weaned off breastfeeding. And so that took a little bit to come back. But then I think by a year, I was back stronger than ever. I would say I didn't performance wise, I didn't get quite back to the level consistently to where I had been pre-Breck. But I mean, I certainly was able to come back in form at those championships. By that point, I guess those championships were my focus a little bit. And I really wanted to make it about, my family kind of doing the whole thing with me. So I think I got darn close. And again, the mental perspective switch of just like knowing that you don't have to live or die by your results. Get to do this, get to soak in the time with the team and at these venues one more time and just do that whole process. I really think gave me a lot of gratitude for that last couple of years of my career that, maybe if I hadn't had that, if I'd continued to stay so driven about the medals, would I have left the sport with just the incredible gratitude I have now?
Well, that's a great segue into talking about community, because I'd love to build up to talking about 2018 by first talking about community and the team of women that you were part of building as far as a community and a support system for each other, starting from that first Olympics. So if you sort of take 2002 to 2018, how can you compare the energy, the support, and the overall culture of the women's team?
Well, I think a good analogy would be a snowball rolling down a hill. And I think, when we were first trying to get that snowball to come together and build up, we made a couple of attempts because there was all the women that were on the 2002 team together. Then there was kind of a new crop of women that kind of came through ups and downs. And then on the 2006 team, we had some women on the national team for a while. We had no women's national team in 2006. So it was like, these groups of women coming together, but for some reason, just not quite gelling to the point until when I made the World Cup team in 2007 following my top 10 at the Olympics and started traveling on the World Cup full time and having to sit out relays in particular and being like, rooming by myself the entire time, being a team person, I was just like, there's got to be a better way to do this. And so really started to make an effort after that, talking to the coaches, talking to the other female athletes across the country to say like let's come together. It's going to take a little concession on all of our parts to find that collaboration, but like let's do it because this is going to be way better if we can do those relays, if we can kind of build that camaraderie. And so I was driving it a little bit, maybe out of some selfish reasons of, yeah, wanting to have other women around. And then, we had this really awesome group of young women come through that were showing results really well. But to their credit, they also, I think, were eager to learn and to improve. And so we were able to start to talk about what does teamwork actually mean? Is it just working together on the snow? Or is it that extra level of really getting to know each other and support each other? And so I think the ingredients were there, but we were fortunate to have Matt Whitcomb come in as one of our coaches who started to really plant this idea of like, how do we come together off the snow even better? He kind of told us we're like siblings. You don't necessarily get to choose your teammates by coming together and figuring out how to work as a family unit. Maybe there would be an inherent power in that. So it started to kind of come together, and then we started to tap into kind of the silly side and find out that when we were having fun together, we got to know each other, and then that too just maybe helped calm the nerves a little bit, helped us really enjoy what we were doing, and that bond just started to build. And what was really interesting in those early years is that we talked about, like, we'd look at a team like Norway where they have maybe 10 different athletes that are capable of getting on a podium, and they have to pick 4 of them for the relay. And here we were like barely able to field a relay, but we started talking about what happens when we get in that position. When there are only 4 people that can be on the start line, how can we all put our best foot forward to make that team, but knowing if we don't get selected, like that we're not just bitter and frustrated, that we actually say, okay, I'm going to come out and I'm going to support my teammates however they can, and I'm going to feel good about whatever result. And I think talking about that well in advance of when we actually got into that situation really helped us navigate the shifts in our team as we got to that level. And that was a huge part of, I know, my experience in 2018 in particular, because I very much knew going into those games I may not be on the team. Like I said, my teammates are skiing so fast, but I was like mentally preparing to be on the sidelines cheering my teammates and feeling really good about that. And then I did end up getting the opportunity, and then I got to witness how amazing my teammates were that night. Those that weren't on the snow, with the bibs on, they were there. They were cheering their hearts out for us. We all got to share that moment right after the finish line. And as I step away from my career now, I mean, that's what really stands out to me. It's not the shiny pieces of metal or the crystal globes. It's like that process we went through as a team and the bonds I have that will last the rest of my life.
Can you replay that race for us, 2018?
Yeah, so I mean, to me, the memory really starts that 36 hours before the race when they still hadn't named who the team was going to be, and it was 10 o'clock at night when Matt walked in the room to finally share the decision, and it had pretty much come down to Sadie Bjornson and I for that first leg. And when he told us it was going to be me, I was hearing the best news I possibly could, while simultaneously Sadie is hearing, she may not get a chance to fight for a medal. And that's when, I mean, her team spirit just came through big time, because her first reaction was, how can I help? How can I support you guys? And from then on, it was just like the team just buoyed around us, and we did everything together. We went for a jog that morning. We did a workout on the course together, and then with a couple hours to go till start time, it was just Jesse and I, and left to finish off our preparation. And she and I realized that the last time we'd teamed up was when we'd won the world championships in 2013. And we realized that back then we were really into the show Glee. So we turned on our favorite episodes of Glee while we tried to kind of choke down this like dry chicken for our lunch. We really just tapped into all that we'd been building. And when we went out there that night, typically 2 hours before the start, you would go meet up with your wax technician and test your skis. But our wax service team had tested every single pair of skate skis in our entire team's fleet and had found the fastest pairs already. So they said, "You guys just focus on what you need to do for the warm up." I threw on my red, white, and blue headphones and I listened to like this upbeat country playlist that I had found that kind of just, I don't know, made me feel American, and just tried to stay loose. And the butterflies in my stomach were at an all-time high because I knew I was going to be racing Marit Bjørgen and Charlotte Kalla, two of the greatest skiers of all time. And then really our team's success was probably going to come down to me keeping us in the race until that last lap so that Jessie could do what we knew she could do. So I was trying to manage all that pressure, but at the same time going, this is my last Olympic race. And so I got to soak this in. And as long as I ski as hard as I can, it will be a wrap on a great career. And so when that camera panned to me for the final time, I just let out a big smile and I knew I was ready to roll my eyes back in my head if I had to. And then the race just kind of unfolded. You know, it's just I was so focused on just skiing smart, putting myself in a good position for, to unleash the energy in the appropriate amounts, and but ready to react to anything. And first lap went great, right in position. A little bit of a close call on the exchange. My skis were still on the table as they were coming down into the stadium, and I only got them on seconds before I made it into the exchange zone. So that gave a little extra boost of adrenaline. But then, second lap when that pace ratcheted up, I was able to match Mara and Charlotte stride for stride, and then I knew that I was going to have it for that last lap. So then it was just about skiing really smart, staying on my feet, not planting that pole between my legs, and just keeping us in good position. And it was really cool to kind of be handing it off to Jessie and have full confidence that she was going to ski a smart and gutsy last lap.
But even when she brought it in, were you 100% sure what had just happened?
I mean, as I watched them come down into the stadium, I saw, or had just let myself think for a split second, like, oh my gosh, barring disaster, we're going to get a medal. And then I saw Mike and Fala from Norway and Stine Nielsen bump skis, and everybody wobbled for a second and was like, oh my gosh, does that, don't think that, don't think that. And then I just remember, watching Stina and Jessie come off that final corner. And I was standing in the finish area behind all the photographers, kind of trying to peek around and realizing that it was a dead on sprint, and just yelling with like all my lung power because Charlotte Kalla was standing next to me and she was yelling with all her lung power. And we thought it was like whoever can yell the loudest is going to get their teammate to the finish line faster. It was a nail biter all the way until that lunge. And I honestly thought when I looked at the scoreboard, I was going to see photo and we'd have to wait. And then when I saw number one, United States 0.19, it was just like, we didn't just get a medal. We just got the gold medal. And I was so unprepared that I let out this just primal like yell and ran over and, tackled Jessie. And then we just got to have like this most amazing moment for like a few seconds there with just the two of us. And then we jumped up and our entire team was right there and we just ran over. And just, I think what it meant for the team and like the effort it taken of everybody to come into that was so special. It just felt like this supreme like validation for all we've known is possible. And we'd been so close so many times, but to make it happen finally at that Olympic level was just like, yes.
Oh, seriously. It is so awesome to hear you recount that story. What we watch, to hear what was going on from your lens, your perspective. It just sort of brings it back the moment. And also it just is a testament to, as you said, all of the years that you all put in there individually, but also collectively for this common goal. And the relay is what a cool thing to watch and also participate in, I imagine.
I mean, again, like just when I got the word that I got to be on that team, I mean, that was the gold medal for me right there. Like just to get one more shot to team up for, the USA and, particularly with Jessie, who'd kind of been like this little sister to me, I got to do it. And then the way it unfolded, that it was such a great race, like some of the greatest skiers of all time. It was a clean race. There weren't any, mishaps because team sprints can be a mess. Just the way it just unfolded like that was so cool. And I think if I had tried to write a story, I couldn't have written such an amazing chapter. Like, and to have it come on the, the last Olympic race, 5 Olympics in, 18 years after that, or 16 years after that, that 10-year plan got laid out. It was just like, wow, what a journey.
What a high.
But it makes it hard to then know that it's like, it is the end. Like, okay, after experiencing that, like I'm really gonna, walk away now. But, all good things come to an end. And I just feel, so much gratitude for all that I got to do. And I think a big part of that Olympics for me too was going in knowing that it's like I get to do this one more time. And I know we're fully capable of winning medals, but if we don't, life's gonna be okay. And I can happily move on to that next chapter. And, lo and behold, that's when it happens, right?
Yeah, so you were really aware that there was a next chapter, that there wasn't another Olympics. There has to be a big letdown after an event like that.
No, there's no letdown just because it was crazy. I mean, we dreamt about winning that gold medal, but we were, in totally new territory in terms of what winning a gold medal means. And so, I mean, thankfully, that was my last race at those 2018 Olympics. Like Jessie had to do the 30K a few days later. So, she did her best to kind of, be on NBC at 2 in the morning and, do all that stuff, but then still keep herself ready for that 30K, which she had a fantastic performance in as well. But I knew I was done. So I got to just really soak it in and enjoy it and be the representative for the team. And so I just, I mean, floated through those next couple of days, found out the next day that I was elected to the IOC, which was an added excitement level. And then as soon as the closing ceremonies were done, we flew to New York City and we did a couple days of a media tour, and that was wild. Got to see Hamilton, and then we zipped back to Europe and we finished up the final races of the World Cup season and came back to the US, did the final national championships, got back to Alaska, big celebrations. But my husband and I had decided we were going to be moving to Canada to pursue his job, and that was happening like right away. So we literally had a week at home, packed up the U-Haul, and then really did start that next chapter like bam.
Wow, and that was the plan the whole time.
It was the plan. Yep.
Yep. So you had post-Olympic plans, which there was probably a lot of wisdom in that.
Yeah, it was good. I mean, again, like I wanted to slow down time a little bit and just really enjoy it as much as I could. But it was so cool to see the momentum and attention around it just for our sport. Super good. So it was just go, go, go. And then finally, it was like the first week of May, no, second week of May, got to our new hometown in Canada. We were just starting getting the house set up. And I felt like I could literally take a deep breath for the first time in probably 2 months. And it was Mother's Day, and had this beautiful May day. It was warm. My husband and my son and I went for this like hike right across from our new house. And I just remember being out there being like, oh my gosh, like life can't get any better. Like it's just perfect day. And then that night is when I was getting ready for bed, and I just happened to notice this hard spot on my chest. I just immediately had kind of like a sinking feeling. Like you're telling yourself it's nothing, but at the same time you're like, I didn't notice that before. Like what is that? And it kind of bothered me that it was Sunday night and I couldn't do anything about it right away. I had to wait. And that's what ultimately turned into breast cancer. A pretty quick turnaround.
Yeah, pretty quick turnaround. Yeah. So if you had an emotional drop, it was deepened during that diagnosis.
Yeah, I mean it's like just the last news you're expecting to get. And so there's a lot of shock and kind of disbelief and immediate frustration of like, no, like I'm supposed to be just kind of enjoying the bask of like finishing my career and all this stuff. Like this is not what is supposed to happen. So I remember processing all those emotions like pretty fast. I was in Sweden when I got the call at one of my friends' weddings who was a World Cup competitor. And it was just like, how can you go from like the high of winning an Olympic gold medal, finishing a career, being a new mom, to like, oh my God, what does this mean? Like, am I gonna survive? It's just wild.
I know that ironically, before that diagnosis, you had been involved in Active Against Cancer and that you process most things in life through physical activity. So tell us about that organization and how you did move through your own treatment, holding that as a priority.
Well, there's a few big ironic events in my life that I wouldn't say foreshadowed the breast cancer diagnosis, but as soon as we knew about that, I was like, holy cow, this is crazy. So, Active Against Cancer, with my success in the World Cup, I'd started to become a recognizable name in Norway. And so we were in Oslo for a World Cup, and a woman contacted me and said, "Hey, I run this organization, Active Against Cancer. We're doing a fundraiser. It's all about promoting physical activity. Would you come out and sign a few posters?" And I went, "Well, I don't know anything about cancer, but I know physical activity is good. So sure, I'll come do it." And so I came out to the event and got to meet the co-founder, and I was like, "Wow, this is a cool organization. Like, it makes sense that physical activity should be a part of cancer treatment." And so kind of loosely stayed involved. Every time we'd come through Oslo for that World Cup, the team and I would go out to the hospital and work out with the cancer patients. And it was always such an inspiring day to see like these people who were bonding through physical activity, that it was helping them process this really difficult thing. And so getting to know Hele and the organization, they're really closely tied with the New York City Marathon because the other co-founder was Greta Waitz, who is the 9-time winner of the New York City Marathon. Amazing athlete, unfortunately faced cancer and ultimately passed away. But so knowing the connection with the New York City Marathon, I always thought like, well, when I retire, I'd love to go run the marathon. I've never run a marathon. It would be cool to experience it, and I can raise some money and awareness for active. So in the back of my mind, that was like a goal coming off of my career. And then in April of 2018, the Active had called me to say they were going to have their annual fundraiser in New York City right before the race, and that they wanted to honor me with an inspiration award for the work I'd done to promote their organization. I was caught off guard by it because I was like, well, I mean, I haven't done that much, like, but I'd love to come and support the event. So then it was literally 2 weeks later that I got my diagnosis, and I had to call Hele back and say, "You won't believe this, but our connection just got that much closer. I'm now going through it myself." And so I kept that kind of idea of running the marathon actually in mind for a while, even after I had started my treatment. Kind of realized after about 3 rounds of chemo that just because I could probably physically complete it probably wasn't the smartest idea. This was actually a time to probably not force my body into that physical zone, but was super honored to be able to attend that Active Against Cancer fundraiser in the fall of 2018 and meet an athlete there who'd been the inspiration award recipient the previous year, a runner named Gabe Grunwald, whose story I had immediately come across in my frantic googling of athlete with cancer. Oh my gosh, and super inspirational story. So I got to meet her and I got to be there. And then I watched the marathon. I watched my teammate Liz Steven run the 2018 race, and then said, "Okay, a year from now, I'm going to be back here and I'm going to do this race."
Did you use that same Olympic mindset to work out a training plan and just get the job done?
It was amazing actually how quickly I would say my athlete frame of mind kicked into gear. I mean, within minutes of hearing the diagnosis, I just kind of realized like, okay, the way I poured my planning and my focus into those athletic goals is what I've got to do here. This is going to be challenging because I'm going to have so much less control over outcomes. I kind of realized I wasn't going to be able to necessarily outwill or outwork the cancer, but I could take this big, scary thing and break it down into like kind of one section at a time. And that was helping me kind of process it. And then I knew how well, I was going to need a really good team of people around me, both on the medical side to kind of appreciate where I was coming from as an athlete, not your typical breast cancer patient, but also the support side of, family and friends to help me, stay positive through what was going to be probably the most challenging thing I'd ever faced. And it was like a role reversal because, I feel like I've always been the one out there, kind of inspiring and leading others. And this was going to be like, no, I'm going to be the one needing the help and support. So thinking about that team approach, and that kind of played into my decision to be really open about my diagnosis and my treatment as well, because I knew that kind of by being open, it was going to bring a little bit more meaning to what I was going through, because I was going to be thinking about, okay, what am I learning? What can I share? How can I put out, help others? But also like knowing that I don't have anything to hide, like showing that I'm actually human, and facing this too, and showing that you can be an Olympic athlete in the shape of your life, doing everything right, and it can still happen. But that because I had done all those right things, and because I was committing to staying active and healthy, like I was going to get to see how that played out and what kind of a difference it made. And then the final part was, I knew this was going to be tough. I didn't know how I was going to feel physically. There weren't any outcomes that were certain. So it was about how can I put things in my life to remind me to stay focused on what I can control, to stay positive in those really challenging moments, to not get sucked into the void of the statistics and the what ifs, and really at the end of the day all those things I can't control, and to just really stay focused on the positive. So that was about like wearing rainbow colored running shoes to my doctor's appointments, and going wig shopping with my high school friends so we could bring in a little bit of fun to it, and just trying to almost like put those things in place beforehand so that when I hit those low points, there was something automatically to be like a safety net a little bit to help lift me up and not let me slide down the opposite way.
I feel you have a lot of generosity to the world and sharing so many parts of you, but especially that stage that in which you were so vulnerable and so didn't have control. But I think that is just a real gift too. There's another organization called the Fast and Female that you've been really involved in. Can you speak about that?
Well, yeah, one of the other ironic pieces was that I've been putting pink in my hair for it's been about 16 years now. And so every so often I would get questions of like, "Oh, pink, is that tied to breast cancer?" And I would always say like, "Well, no, I don't really have a personal connection to it. I mean, I support research and education, but to me it was pink. The pink was like about fast and female, about being, a woman athlete that is strong and capable, but, can be it's okay to be a female and to, use that pink color as energy and excitement and like almost like a rallying signal. And so with fast and female, the idea is, we're trying to plant the seed with girls that staying involved in sports will provide so many benefits for their lives. I mean, it's not just like the physical things you gain, it's the teamwork, it's the resiliency, it's the confidence. And for women in particular, we've noticed that there's a group dynamic piece, like the social belonging, like when you're a part of something, when you have strong role models, that encourages girls to stay in sports. So Fast and Female was all about fostering that environment of really supportive environment for girls to come in to maybe experience sport for the first time, to try new sports, to meet their role models in person, not just some person on a cereal box somewhere, but like actually like people that grew up in their community and they could relate to. And so we started hosting events around the country, and I pulled all my teammates in and they were awesome. And we would have these like events where for 4 hours we'd have 200 girls, and we would run them through obstacle courses and dance routines. And I mean, we'd be exhausted by the end of it, but yet also so energized by just reconnecting with why we all got involved in sports in the first place. And I worked on Fast and Female for 12 years, and through that I got to see like so many cases where a girl simply coming to our event, that gave her that confidence, that influence to then stay involved in sports. And then some of those girls that started as participants ended up becoming the athlete role models later on. I guess I skipped a big part of that Fast and Female was started by a Canadian racer, Olympic gold medalist in 2006, Chandra Crawford, who had become a good friend of mine on the World Cup when she was one of the only women from Canada and I was from the only women from the US. And even though we were fierce competitors, we became best friends. And, she was generous enough to share the Fast and Female kind of concept with me. And I fell in love with it. And then we've kind of worked on it together over a decade now.
It's really consistent with everything that you stand for. And I look forward to spreading the news of Fast and Female because I think a lot more people will be interested in it.
It's great. It's a lot of fun, but it's amazing the impact you can make just in a few hours sometimes of connecting girls. And I think there's unlimited opportunities to expand that. And I ended up with a little boy, so part of Fast and Female is also just kind of integrating boys and men into the picture too, and saying like how can we all just support each other, stay physically active, and go forward.
And do you all see a critical age in which being physically active is important and then becomes durable in its importance?
Yeah, I mean that I will by no means quote research here, but I think we found for girls in particular, when they get into that kind of middle school, high school age is typically when we start to see the highest attrition rates with girls compared to boys. So really trying to focus on those supportive environments and role models and connections, pre high school to keep girls involved because puberty and social pressures, and so keeping them engaged there is really crucial. But I would say now that I've been a parent is that keeping, really just establishing the that daily habit of physical activity at the youngest age you can, so that as the kid grows up, that's all they know is that they like to move every single day. So with my son Breck, he's going to be 5 in April. I just really try to integrate, physical activity in however we can, so that he's just used to, he's excited to go out and try lots of different things, and that's just what we do.
Yeah, that's your family culture. What have been some of the biggest challenges you've had to overcome related to balancing your passion and your career?
Well, I'm in an interesting zone now, in that I'm about 2 years into the transition post ski career. And so I have this 20-year body of experience and skill sets that were easy to integrate into sport. But how do I, number one, personally translate that experience into what kind of roles are gonna be able to best utilize that skills and experience in a way that ignites me like ski racing did. But it's really hard because it's like taking round pegs and fitting them into square holes. Like, the way the business world talks about roles, you don't exactly see where those things mesh up. And I'm in a really fortunate position where I have a lot of interests and a lot of amazing connections that has created this world of opportunities of where to put my energy. But there's almost so many things to do that I find myself a little bit spread too thin, overextended, and just a little bit overwhelmed sometime of, what is that right fit? And so I'm finding it's a little bit like trying different training modalities. Like sometimes you got to try something and then you kind of see if it works or it's not. And you got to get good at evaluating and then finding out how the pieces fit together. So it's a really good problem to have, but it's been a bigger challenge than I would have guessed upon completing my racing career.
What is your role with the IOC as an athletes commission member?
So I didn't realize when I ran for the role, because I knew I was running for the athletes commission, but because I was elected by my peers, I actually became a full IOC member. So that all of a sudden like took the Olympic world and burst it open in front of me, to where I sit in the General Assembly of the IOC. So there's about 100 plus members from all over the world, and you get immersed in the finances, the business, the Olympic solidarity, like the reputation, like I mean, it's so much more than I ever appreciated as an Olympic athlete. Fascinating to learn about the Olympic movement, given it that it's like the biggest event in the world that brings so many nations together and sports, and really does it still on a national, for the national pride, and stands for so many positive values in the world. So that's been really fascinating, but it has turned into a pretty big commitment because so I sit on the IOC, and then because I'm an IOC member, I sit on the US Olympic and Paralympic Committee board. So now I get to see all that level at the US domestic level. And then there's various commissions within the IOC. So there's a Women in Sport Commission, which of course I gravitated to because of my interest in fast and female. There's a Sustainability and Legacy Commission, which I gravitated towards because I come from a winter sport that's, dealing with climate change. I got appointed to the Milan Cortina Coordination Commission, so, preparing for their 26 Winter Games. And then I end up also on the LA 2028 Organizing Committee Executive Board. So what started off as like, oh yeah, Kikkan, it'll be a couple meetings a year, has turned into like all these opportunities, which have been really fascinating. I mean, to understand the Olympic movement and to be able to make connections in sport has been great, but it's also added another layer of complexity to figuring out kind of my career path and how I pack everything into each day.
Yeah, I can imagine. Is that a term position?
It's an 8-year position, so my term would be until 2026.
Yeah. Wow. Well, thank you for all of your dedication in that. I'm sure it's going to affect in a positive way all of those subgroups as well. Do you travel to Lausanne?
So pre-COVID, I was traveling quite a bit. I've been to Luzon a couple of times. About a year ago, I got to be at the Youth Olympic Games and see that in person, which was really really cool. Yeah, so I get to travel internationally for that. I also get to travel Colorado Springs and to LA, and places to see kind of the Olympic movement here at home. So in 2019, I spent 270 days on the road between meetings, speaking engagements. I did some presentations in the Nordic world. So I spoke on cruise ships of all things, which is crazy to look back on now. That was a little bit intense. I have to say, my goal in 2020 was to scale back the travel, and then boom, COVID hit. So I kind of got my wish there. But and as we come out of this, it'll be an interesting challenge to kind of figure out what that right amount is of traveling, but also utilizing amazing tools like to do some of those roles online as well.
And being a planner, do you imagine what that balance is?
I keep trying to come up with spreadsheets to help me figure out what that's going to be. I don't think there is a perfect spreadsheet out there on how you decide. So I guess real actually in the last month or so, maybe it's the kickoff of a new year. I've been really trying to look at it from the lens of like, okay, what are my values? What's my purpose? And trying to create a little bit of a framework to make some decisions in a more structured way to try to narrow the focus a little bit. I know that it's always going to be a bit of trial and error, ebb and flow, sometimes being overwhelmed, sometimes being underwhelmed. But I think because I've been through the cancer experience, I'm really trying to use that as the forefront reminder to like, just because you can do everything, maybe that's not the most effective use of my time. Like I promised myself when I was going through treatment, I wanted to make sure I was focusing on the people that were the most important to me and on the things that are most important, because it just goes to show you can be an Olympic champion, but you never know. And so trying to remind myself that even though I'm 2 years post treatment now and life feels like it's gone pretty much back to normal, of like staying true to that, like, okay, but let's make sure I'm packing, making every day count. And I'm not perfect at it by any means, but that's kind of what I strive to do.
Thank you for sharing that. We're going to have to go into the final stretch. And I have a question for you that relates to the theme of this podcast, When Women Fly. It's a podcast where we celebrate the spirit of taking on challenges and reaching beyond predetermined height, which clearly you are exemplary at. The metaphor of flight, it's a symbol, but it's also more than that. And I wondered if you could leave us with a closing thought about your passion to fly metaphorically and pursuing that passion.
I'm going to be a little bit corny here and say cross country skiing is kind of the perfect metaphor for life. The definition of cross country is that it's one third uphill, one third downhill, and one third flat. When I'm out on a ski course, I feel like there will be ups and downs. You get halfway up a monster climb and you are doubting your ability to do it. Your physical brain is saying this hurts, slow down, stop. But if you can just kind of narrow that focus and literally get yourself to take one step at a time, it's amazing how you make it up the hill and you get up to the top and maybe you see the most incredible view. And then you experience the exhilaration of sailing down the other side. And then after that exhilaration, well, maybe you hit a flat again and you kind of regroup. And so to me, the concept of the up and down, taking it all in stride. And then for me, the feeling of gliding on the snow is that perfect combination of putting the effort in. Like you don't want to just sail through life without friction, but you get that experience of flying. You sail along, and on days when it clicks, man, it does feel effortless and just amazing.
I love it. Kikkan, how can we find out more about you and your projects that we've talked about on this podcast?
Well, I am Keek Animal on Instagram, Twitter, and Kikkan Randall on Facebook. You can always find me at kikkan.com. You never know where I might pop up because, like I said, those interests are kind of boundless. But yeah, I get to work on a lot of cool projects, and I would love for you to follow along. Help me out with promoting that healthy physical activity habit, feeling empowered through sport, being an active parent, being a thriving cancer survivor, and just living every day to the fullest. Got to keep life fun and silly, right?
Yeah. Thanks so much, Kikkan. This has been a lot of fun.
Well, I'm thrilled to be on your podcast. I think it's such a great banner to explore further, and I can't wait to listen to who you have on next.
Thank you for listening to the When Women Fly podcast. My hope is that you leave this conversation with a sense of curiosity and empowerment to hold on to what is important and let go to what weighs you down. stare fear in the face. If you like this episode of the When Women Fly podcast, be sure to share and subscribe and let us know what you think. We love feedback. Be brave, be bold, and fly. See you next time.